Hey guys, I'm back again. So now I just ran in order to check the how everything was going with the tests. So we have a broken test, and don't worry, I haven't added anything. So this is just the default test that you can see is app component should render title. So we have something broken there on app component. Seems to be because let me just check. Is this one? No, sorry. So because let's go to app component that spec, and this is going to try to run all this. Okay, so it's going to check that we have the text content. So give me a second just to match those with what I have app component.ts. Okay, yeah, so this is actually the problem. The application is still only the services, so don't worry too much. And this is because it's trying to check the Angular 9 testing, but we don't have anything like that in the app component. And if I just come here and do this, so this is not something that we are going to do. So let me just do this and check. Okay, that's my established connection. You can see it says 1 fail, 7 success. Okay, it's going to run back again. Forgot that it runs after I save. So, and this is the terminal that I'm using. This is from Laragon. Um, it allows us to create WordPress and Laravel projects easier, and it comes with this terminal. So this is actually pretty nice instead of using Git Bash. So let me close that. Okay. And you can see we have the post service work. Everything works because we disable the testing for something that we actually don't care. We don't care to see if the title of the application is Angular 9 testing app is running or Angular 9 testing. And this is the okay, there's a missing or an S there. Content span. Okay, it's the app is running. Okay, so this is not something that we actually want to see or are worried about, and sometimes this is something that bothers us while we are building the tests, but it's something that just happens, and you need to be aware of the test that you want and you don't want. Delete all the tests that comes by default with the scaffolding of the application and just move on with your own tests. So we have this service and we need to go to services.component.ts. So now this is going to be quite a long video, guys, so just get something to drink or something to eat, and if you're not following along, if you are following along, then just be patient with this. So let me just search for that. Okay, and this is, well, this is, yeah, it's kind of I was going to say something, but no. It's big actually, but yeah. And I'm freaking 9 years old. So let's go to services second point aspect. It's not that big actually. It's only like 100, yeah, 100 lines of code. So it should create the component. Okay, so this is running actually fine because it's creating the actual component. So I'm going to explain a little bit as I move on. So we will need first, you can see we have the services component here, which is the component that we are testing. So it actually needs to import the component that requires, okay, for testing, and this is the description for that specific component, okay. But the component requires other things like forms and HTTP and routing and all that. So we actually need to import for every component that requires that. We need to import every single module that comes with it. Okay, so we don't have an error. So for example, what I'm going to do, let's just add this as I have it here because I have it with some comments, and I think that should be useful for you too. I'm not pretty fond of testing because sometimes it allows you to move with a firmer step while building your application. But for applications, for example, I've been working with several applications and we don't require testing because it's not something that we worry about. We worry about the how fast we can deploy the application. But of course, we need some how can I say this? Actually, testing is not something that we care about. Okay, so that's actually the main thing that that is, that we are not using this kind of tests on our projects. So yeah, but it's a nice thing to learn and to understand. So let's say we have the reactive forms module. Remember that we have the newsletter, so we need to import that into this spec.ts. Sorry, I cannot freaking speak. We have the router, so we need to emulate the router in this environment. So this is a different environment of a normal application. So we need the browser module. Let me just make this bigger so you can see better. Reactive Forms module, and you can see what is the description. Okay, it doesn't say that. Okay, but the browser module is going to allow us to move as if we were using the outlet router or the specific router. Since we are using lazy loading, okay, we are going to do a few things with this. And router testing module is the what allows us to use the router in this environment. Okay, so we require these two. So yeah, this is all because we need to emulate the behavior that we have in the regular environment of the application. And we need to import our routes from app routing module because we are going to check for redirections. I think I've been using that. So, oh no. You know why this is it? Because we're using lazy loading, and in this case, we need to load the specific chunk of the that part of the application. So that's why we're using this. For other examples, of course, we will use a router testing module in order to send the user kinda in this environment to the other route in case we are redirected or we are redirecting, sorry, or something like that. So okay, so we have the description or the describe of what all this is going to do. We import the service component and the fixture, which is going to allow us to work in this environment. Okay, so yeah, the test bed. Okay, so the test bed is going to allow us. Where is the test bed? Okay, the test bed is here, but it's going to allow us to work in this specific environment of testing. And the fixture is going to allow us to grab the component as if it was on the normal environment that we use in the browser. Okay, so every time we have a test, we're going to run the before each, and the other one is, okay, I don't have that here, but it's not going to be needed. So before each testing or each part of this, before we have an it, is going to run these two, in this case, because we have two specific functions that are going to create the component environment and check for the changes and allow us to grab whatever we have in this environment in this kind of copy of the component. Okay, so before we start working with this, we need to actually use what we have imported. Okay, this imports the reactive forms, the browser module, the testing module, and the routes themselves. So what we're going to do is to add an import, sorry, here before each, because before each, as I told you, this is going to run before each test inside this specific file. Okay, so it's going to run that, and we will need to import the Reactive Forms module, the browser module, the router testing module with routes, and we add the routes. This is going to allow us to load the lazy routed routes in order to reach the destination that we want. Okay, so let me just add this in comments so you can see. So the fixture allows us to create the instance of the component. As I said, it's kind of a shadow copy of the component that we have. And shadow instance is something that you will see in the React Enzyme for testing, of course. So after that, we get the component instance here, which is the component. As you can see, this is the instance of the component, the shadow. And so let me just copy this. I find that this should be okay. I think this should be easier for you to understand. So with the comments, I mean, so the detection or application of the changes, so applies or detects the changes in the HTML in the component instance. In case we want to check a title, a component, well, we can test if a component is inside another component. So it's going to run before each, detect the changes, and keep running, okay, until we reach the end of our tests. So that's the thing. Testbed is the environment itself, okay. We will need to do a few things with testbed later, but testbed is the environment itself what allows us to run the test. Fixture is what allows us to create the instance of the component, the shadow copy of the component, and the fixture is going to be able to detect the changes in the HTML in order to check the corresponding tasks, okay, or tests. So the first one is it, okay, should create, and we expect this component to be true. To return true, we expect the service component to run and to be created without any problems. That's what this is doing. So this is not a big deal. This is not something that we will worry too much about waiting for a component to be created or expecting, because this is created by default with the Angular scaffolding for the components. So, and this is why I said that some videos are going to be pretty long, because well, the first one, of course, this one, the next test is going to be kind of easier because we will only review a few things and continue. I will try to build some memory so we can just explain a few things and move on, so you get the best idea that you can get with all this. So we create a new function here. This is an arrow function. So what we are going to do, we're going to create a new test, which is going to be it. The component should find an element with the class title and have the our services content. Okay, so what we're going to do here is check constant compile. I'm going to build this by hand. So we're going to get the fixture, which is already set. The fixture is the instance, as you remember, or I hope you remember, the instance of the component. This is the shadow copy of the component. Now we are going to say the book element, and we're going to query for the class that we want. Remember that we want the class title, so using by is going to allow us to check, I think, ID and can I say ID? No. It's going to allow us to check for the CSS. Okay. I can remember this pretty well. Sorry guys, because I haven't touched this in a while. So, and we are going to receive the native element that is going to allow us to check for the specific element that we are looking for. So this is the HTML itself. We're going to look using the CSS. That's why it says we query by the CSS of class title, and we should receive the element itself. So we expect, this is just a simple test. We're going to start with a simple test. We expect compiled to be equal. You can set this constant to whatever you want, to the name you want. You can say foobar or bamboo, whatever you want. So we expect compile to not and to be false. We expect it to be true, but we're saying it in the reverse state. So we're expecting this not to be false. This should not be false. This should not return false. The class title in the component that we are shadowing. And also we expect, because we need to check if the services content is there, compiled that text content that to contain, okay, so this is going to check the actual text to contain our services. So this is the title. So let's save this and let's see if we get something. 5 success. Combine from group. Okay, I will need to check that, but this is working. And sometimes you will get these warnings because of the shadowing itself, but in that case you can just add or check the form group. It doesn't say actually where, but this is not something that is going to break your testings, so don't worry too much about that. And if it breaks, you will need to see what is going on, okay? But right now we don't need to worry about those. So let's take a look at the next one, okay? So I'm just going to copy this one because this is kind of fast. So it should contain a list of services. We already created the test itself, so you can see here, okay, that should find an element with the class title. This is pretty small, and should create. We have the still should create, and this is the test that we just created, and you can see it's green. So we have C6 passed. Okay. So it should contain a list of services. So we look for the service array inside the component. So how we do that? We grab the component, okay, that this is the services component, this is the instance of the component, and we grab the services attribute and we check the length to be greater than 0. We don't want these services to be empty, so let's save that. And let me show you what I mean with this. We grab from the services component, which you can see here, the component, we grab the services, which is this on line 15, okay, and we check for this array, which is ending here, to have a length major or bigger than 0. That's the only thing we're doing, okay? We're starting with the basic and smaller tests, so you can get your head around this. So every time we run a test, we say expect, we expect this to happen, we expect this to be something or whatever, okay? So that's the definition. So this is something more like English language or whatever language. You expect something to happen and you check for that. And we're going to run the validity. Let me just copy this. Let me just get this. So it should validate the form with the correct data. Right now, what we want in the form, we have the required validators for the email and content. And what we're going to do is just to add those values and see if that triggers the valid functionality of the application. No, sorry. I'm using Brave and I have the rewards added, just to check them out. And it's adding those. So I should click those, but fuck that. Async. So we're going to run here an async. Sorry, what the hell is going on with me? Async function here, and all this should work fine. Okay, well, let me just async, no adding, async. Okay, function. Okay, and inside we add another one, and we should be fine. Nice. I got a little mess up there. So we're going to run an async function because we want to wait for something to happen. In this case, we want to wait for the form to be filled. Okay, so this is going to wait for that. And what we're going to do is to say, let's type it. So remember, we need to check if the form is going to receive the correct information, or sorry, if the correct information added to the form is going to trigger the valid state. So that's why it say the component should validate the form with the correct data. So component, and you can see we have some features there, but we will add the request form. Okay, we can access the request form from the component. So we are accessing the component a request form here. Okay, then from this we're going to check the controls, and this is some basic stuff for the forms, and we're going to grab the email. Okay, you should even allow me to grab it without using this syntax, but just to make sure, let's just keep it like that. So we are going to set the value, okay, to be what we're waiting for the email. We are waiting Aldo Cava an email. Okay, so we're going to just run that email component, the request form that controls, and the other one is content. We're going to set the value of that to be what you're expecting to have something. Okay, so this is just a test. Okay, and that should be it. So what we expect, let me just remove that spacing there. Looks okay. So expect. So what it says, should validate the form with the correct data. Okay, so we expect component request form to have the valid property or attribute to be truthy. So what the hell is that thing? To be truthy, to return true. Okay, so we want this to return true. Let's save this. Let's take a look at this. It's going to run. Should contain a list of services, should validate the form with the correct data. But what happens if I add just something like this? And services component should validate the form with the correct data is returning an error. Why? Well, I cannot see this. Okay, it doesn't. Okay, you can see this is saying error expected false to be truthy. Why false? Because at this point we are only adding a value, okay, which the form is not accepting. So this valid property attribute is not being changed. It's still false as we are setting that using the validators. So if we add the correct information, we just save that again, then this should just run fine, and you can see that. So we only have one more to run today, and I will release these videos as soon as I can. I will start uploading these ones. I need to build the thumbnail, but this should be ready for you to see and continue if that is what you want. Should call. Okay, so we're going to start should call the send request method on the input. So this is a little tricky. So we're going to use another async function, and this is going to be a little tricky because we cannot grab the request as it is. So we need to say spy on is going to be imported, right? What's our, well, let's see what happens. As I said, I can remember this pretty well, so this should be actually working. So this is component. What is the component? The component is the shadow copy of the component. Well, actually the component. And what we need to spy, we need to check if something is running. So we need to check the send request function. Okay, this is the name of the function, and this is the name of the component. So let me just copy this, and this is spying the method emitted. Okay, now, so we need to get the submit input. So for that, we're going to say let input. So remember, the input is just the is it send request? Okay, I will take a look in a second. Just give me a second. So let's say fixture. Got a little lost there. I'm not going to lie. The book element query. If I can type query, and again by CSS. This is the easiest way to grab something. Okay, so this is the ID. Sorry, submit. So we're going to grab the submit native element, and I think I know where we are going. Okay, so what is the problem with this? Let me just, well, I cannot save because it's going to run. So what we want to check if the submit actually runs the send request function. If we submit the form, if this function runs, okay, that is the logic of the test. Okay, but what is the problem? The problem is that we cannot click this, we cannot test for that in the current state. So that's why we're going first to spy this, to spy the send request method in the component, okay, which is this, which is going to use this task submitted true, because we want to see the change of this property in order to see that the function is being called. That is something that is kind of tricky to understand, but is needed in these testings. So for this, we will need to run the to actually click, but we cannot click. Okay, this is the problem. We cannot click in the environment, so we will need to set this with the input click. So we will need to set this with the with code input that click. We have this functionality that is useful in these cases. So when we click, we want the send request to be called, which is the function. So let's say expect component that send request that to have been called times 0. Okay, so what is the logic of this test? Okay, so there is more that we can see. So let me just check for this. I save it again. Let's see. Okay, it's not. If I save it again, is it going to run? No, because it's not saving actually. Okay, but it's actually running green. Where the hell is that? Should call the send request method on the input. But what is the trick with this? Okay, remember before we added the email and content, and this is checking that the form is set to valid. But what is happening here? Remember that every time we're running is cleaning the state and adding the new check-ins. So at this point, we don't have the data. So why we have to have been called 0 times? Because at this point, the data inside the form is not valid. The form is empty because it was created again. How we can test that everything is running fine? We will need to add again the controls and the values as we run this specific test. Okay, that's why we have to have been called 0 times here, because we expect the form to be empty. Hence, the valid is not going to be set to true, and hence the button is going to be disabled. That's what we are expecting to happen. It's a little tricky. You can see this is disable request form valid. That's why we have that there. But at that point, we cannot click inside the. We will need a user to click. Okay, but we don't have a user to click, so that's why we use the input click. We grab the input with the ID submit, which is the submit type input that we have. Okay, this one on line 25, and then we just check for this form submitted to change. Okay, so we know this case, actually this is not working. I just realized that because the function is not even being called. But if you want to call that, you will need to set the send request controls to be valid here. So you will need to add them inside this if. For example, if we create another one that checks that when all this is valid, and after that we click submit and we check the submitted is changing, then we will need to add that inside another call. Okay, I know it's a little tricky, and that's why sometimes for most people it's not worth the effort of going through all these tasks, but you will at least learn how to move and how to deal with these files in case you know you have the bad luck of having to check these kind of files. You know, if you have a job that manages testing, well, you will learn more than with just this simple tutorial, but at least this will give you the chance to understand what the hell is going on. So yeah, just to recap this last bit, okay, we're going to should call, okay, but this should be added, should call the send request method on the input, should not call, because the input at this point has empty values. This is not going to change anything, just how we are defining the correct description of the test. So it should not call the send request method on the input. How we can check if it's called? So we can check if it's called if we use the to have been called times 1. Sorry. So you can see expected expire send request to have been called once, but it was called 0 times because at this point the button is disabled. So as I said, this is a little tricky, guys, but I hope you kind of understood how this is kind of working. So this is the first still component. Let me just make this blah blah blah, and sorry, I'm working with PHP, sorry. Oh, this is not it. Sorry guys, give me just a second. npm run dev and npm run run dev. Okay, so this is my API. Sorry guys, I just missed that, and this is it. So you can see it shows you the, okay, even shows you the message. Yeah, so yeah, let's ng serve. Just to finish this, guys, just give me a second in case this wants to freaking load fast. If not, okay, it's compiling. So but this is a simple testing. let me just check the time. It was 34 minutes. 34 minutes in order to explain just simple form testing, the simple submit, and the check-ins of the array, the property of the title with the class, and that. So at this point, we just added the browser module and router testing module because we need those because we're using lazy loaded. Okay, we're not using the let me just refresh this since it's already working. We are not using the methods that those two modules allow us to use in order to test. We are only adding these modules because we are using the lazy loaded feature in Angular. Okay, so remember, you will need to import whatever you have inside the component, and we are using these testings, and every time that you need to say router or HTTP, it's going to use some testing module that Angular already has implemented. Okay, so that's it guys, and see you in the next one.